on Wednesday, November the 15th. Tanks and military personnel patrolled the streets of Zimbabwean capital city Harare. The military also took control of the state broadcaster and said the 93-year-old President Robert Mugabe was safe in custody while criminals surrounding him in parliament were allegedly removed. Is Zimbabwe in the midst of a coup? How should the country transition power from the only leader they've had since gaining independence in 1980? To answer these questions and more, joining me in the Beijing studio is Madame He Wenping, a research fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. We shall also speak to our CGTN correspondent based in Harare, Farayu Makutuya, as well as Yupanyu Makone Matanga, a freelance journalist who witnessed events unfolding in the city. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Before we start, let's look at this.
It is hard to say whether the recent political upheaval is the ancient grudge between 93-year-old Robert Mugabe and his obedient aide of 40 years, Emmerson Mnangagwa, or if it's the consequences of an unbalanced relationship between government and military. After being sacked as vice president and dismissed from the parliament this week, Mnangagwa decided to snap back, and quickly. He called in a favor from his close ally in the army, Defense Force Commander General Constantino Chiwenga, and put the president in house arrest on Wednesday. Another key figure at the center of the storm is the president's second wife, Grace Mugabe, who depends solely on her husband's support in her political ambitions. Grace is not very respected among Zimbabweans, but she has shown great confidence in getting elected as vice president as soon as her husband survived the little bump. Mugabe himself is also running for the 2018 elections, despite being under house arrest. Looking back on his rule of almost 4 decades, Mugabe seems to have a way of getting out of political turmoil. In the 2008 elections, Mugabe's ZANU-PF party lost its parliamentary majority. He was defeated by opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai in the presidential vote. Mugabe was forced to form a power-sharing government and named his rival as prime minister. But Tsvangirai never managed to dent ZANU's dominance. In 2013, Mugabe's party abolished prime minister's post and passed a new constitution. But the recent political crisis has given the opposition hope again, and they are planning to continue their democratic campaigns once Mugabe is out of the picture.
Wenping, welcome to our discussion here. What do you know about the latest development? Do you think Mr. Robert Mugabe, the former president, quote-unquote, who is now in custody, would be put under house arrest forever, or do you think this is an approach of a soft landing? It's been soft pedaled, and after this period of transition, he's going to be released. After all, he is the paramount leader of this country for 37 years, since the day of independence.
Well, I don't think he will be put on the house arrest forever. So that's impossible. Actually, President Zuma from the South Africa, he had already phoned with President Mugabe, and Zuma said Mugabe's health is in good condition, and including all his family now is very safe, so it's good condition. And also President Zuma sent a special envoy to the Zimbabwe, and I think that the special envoy has been discussing with all those the future place for the Mugabe and his family. I heard now maybe the destination could be like Namibia, so his family maybe will move to another country like Namibia for the rest of the stay. So wouldn't be forever in custody and for house arrest in the country.
A life for the family in exile is better somehow than being imprisoned after the coup. Well, it's said to be a coup. We need to have independent confirmation about what is going on there. Therefore, let me go to Yupanyu Makone Matanga, a freelance journalist in Zimbabwe. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Tell us the latest, please.
Well, the latest is that President Jacob Zuma's envoys to Zimbabwe have been meeting with stakeholders, and they have a deal. There's been a deal that's been proposed, and so it has been proposed that Mnangagwa should lead a transitional government with 2 deputy presidents, one of whom is suggested to be Dumiso Dabengwa, who is a former Minister of Home Affairs and a ZIPRA commander. The other proposal is to have Joyce Mujuru, who is former vice president and who was expelled in a similar fashion in 2014. There are reports that there's to be a prime minister, and this is suggested to be leader of the main opposition faction, MDCP.
There has been some form of democracy in Zimbabwe despite the alleged dictatorship. This is a nasty word, but it's been used by the Western media for years to describe the nature of the regime in Zimbabwe. So do you forecast a kind of free and fair election so that the legitimacy of the power transfer could be guaranteed in this context?
I think the election will be as free and as fair as is necessary to grant legitimacy to the incumbent. We must understand that this is not a transfer of power from ZANU-PF to another entity, to say an opposition party. It is a transfer of power from Mugabe to another member of ZANU-PF. And I believe that the military's intention is to keep ZANU-PF intact and just, renew the leadership within the party.
Do you believe there will be a new constitution?
No, I do not believe so. I think we've just come out of a constitutional process. So it would be, and the one we have has not yet even been aligned to the laws that we have in the country, are yet to be aligned to the 2013 constitution. So we still have a long way to go. I do not believe there will be another constitutional process.
But do you believe this latest move by General Chivenga, the army chief, is constitutional or unconstitutional? Because that's been the overriding concern shared at least by President Zuma from South Africa, and I believe also shared by leaders of other states in the African Union.
Well, our constitution is quite explicit in terms of the ability of the military to interfere or to intervene in civilian affairs and, in essence, the governance of the country. What I do not believe that the actions by Chiwenga are constitutional. However, the outcome will determine the degree of constitutionality or the degree of ability for history to judge him as having acted correctly or incorrectly in this case. I think that what they really need now is for the president who is, in office constitutionally to grant them legitimacy and for them to be able to move forward. So I think the impasse or the time period that it's taking for us to have formal announcements of what's going on and formal announcements regarding our future governance arrangements have a lot more to deal with legitimacy and Mugabe legitimating this process than it does to do with people trying to come up with how is the country going to be governed. I believe that this has already been determined.
Well, thank you so much. That's Yopanyu Makoni Matanga, a freelance correspondent based in Harare. Thank you so much for updating us on the latest in Harare. Let me go to...
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go to Farai Mwakutuya, our CGTN correspondent in Harare. Hello. What do you think will be the follow-up maneuvers moving forward with a new government putting in place?
Well, we have been hearing that these negotiators that have been sent through by President Zuma have been meeting both the military and President Robert Mugabe and other political players in the opposition to try and come up with some sort of resolution, a peaceful resolution and a speedy resolution to the situation. There is speculation, but still to be confirmed, still to be verified, that we could see some sort of transitional arrangement that includes, the ruling party calling in some of the opposition parties. And that has gained some currency because yesterday when the war veterans spoke, when they held their press conference, they have been very loyal supporters of President Robert Mugabe, they opened the door to the opposition and said, look, let us all work together for a prosperous transition for this country. And so that speculation has been heightened because of that. And we expect, hopefully, that during the course of this day, we'll get some clarity in terms of the way forward, in terms of what the leadership will be. It does look likely, though, that President Robert Mugabe may no longer be the leader because of this growing pressure for him to step down from within his own party and from within people who used to be very, very loyal to him, now also saying that it is time for him to hand over and pave way for someone else.
Hariri, given the paramount leadership and unrivaled enormous influence of Mr. Robert Mugabe, who has been in power since 37 years ago, why did we have very quiet public response in the wake of the alleged coup?
Well, I think people were, there were a couple of factors why there was this reaction. Number one, I think people were in a bit of disbelief, shocked, didn't expect this. This was very for people because only a week ago, less than 7 days ago, President Robert Mugabe looks to be in total control. He had thousands of his supporters who came out and showed solidarity with him when he had fired the former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The whole party was saying that they want the First Lady to be the Vice President. So President Robert Mugabe looked to be in total control. These events took everyone by surprise. People were very shocked. This is very uncharted territory for Zimbabwe, very unprecedented. And it's also because the army wields a lot of power as well. It's very respected, also feared, so people were not sure what to do. They were not sure which way to go because they were not clear about what the future was. And that's why there was this muted response. But I also think that a lot of Zimbabweans felt that you know, indeed, the concerns that the army was raising, that the hardships that people were suffering, the economic challenges that were facing the country were no longer being addressed because the ruling party was more preoccupied with factional fights, with trying to find a successor for President Robert Mugabe. And so they weren't looking at the issues that were affecting ordinary people. And so there were some who perhaps would have said, look, if this will give us an opportunity for our challenges to be addressed, then let's see which way things will go.
Thank you so much, Hariri, for briefing us on the dramatic development in Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. Let me come back to the Beijing studio. Wenping, why did we have a visit by the Army Chief Chivanga to China a couple of days before the coup? What was the immediate response from the Chinese authorities to the political event in Zimbabwe?
Well, this military delegation visit to China, I think the timing is a pure coincidence. So because this military activity, that was even a shock to me. When I heard this news, like a military even came out and trying to block the street and house arrest President Mugabe. That was a shock to me because I have been to Zimbabwe 2 years ago, and I have followed the story in Zimbabwe very closely. So because to my observation, the people in Zimbabwe, they are very quiet.
Were you aware that there has been power struggle between different factions within the ruling party?
Yes, this kind of a power struggle is not new.
You mean it's a part of office politics, it's everywhere?
Yeah, it's not new. Even in Zimbabwe, has been there for a long time already. When you trace back to the year 2014, at that time, President Robert Mugabe also sacked the deputy president. That was a lady called, her name is called Jururi. So at that time, two ladies are competing. One is the deputy president, another is the first lady. But at that time, first lady wasn't so close to the power center like today as she is. So at that time, first lady was just like the leader of a women's association. But she had already made her move. Now she's trying to move to the core of the party. So that's why there is a competition. And then again, of course, no doubt about that. So the then deputy president was sacked. And then they chose another. President Mugabe chose another. But at that time, the military official, the high-level one, they keep quiet. So they have no against those ideas, like change B to replace A, because they think it's no difference, all coming from those veterans, those liberation fighters, you know, the liberation war, the fighters, because the new choose the one also around like 70 something, so it's from
obviously all the major players in the
veteran.
game must have underestimated the possibility of having military intervention that we saw Wednesday. Thank you so much for being with us, Wen-Ting. With that, we come to the end of the first part of our program on the latest development in Zimbabwe. We'll come back after the short break. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. In the second part of today's program, we shall be talking to Mr. Hua Liming, former Chinese ambassador to Iran, and James Ray, professor from California State University, Sacramento. We shall also speak by satellite to Mayor Javadanfa, a Middle East analyst. They will discuss another political crisis unfolding at the moment in Lebanon, following the shock resignation of its Prime Minister, Saad Hariri. Welcome to our show, gentlemen. James, what's your take about the conspiracy theory? Do you believe this is a part of the combination arising from sectarian tensions between Sunnis and Shiites in Lebanon?
Well, I do think the Lebanese Ministry of Interior has said there's no evidence of an assassination plot, and Prime Minister Hariri has good relations, really, with Hezbollah within the context of the Lebanese political system. So if any assassination attempt were to be coming, it would be coming from Syrian Hezbollah, and if they're not really, in fact, they're sort of welcoming him to return, there would really be no logical actor who would be threatening him, though, of course, being that his father had been assassinated, I think we could understand the plausibility of that claim.
Many Lebanese sources accused Saudi Arabia, Mr. Hua Liming. They accused Saudi Arabia of holding Hariri captive, forcing him to resign because he chose to deal with Hezbollah differently than they wished. I mean, Saudis may disagree with him about the way he dealt with Hezbollah, which has been backed up by Tehran, which has an army better equipped and far stronger than the government forces.
According to the Lebanese constitution, the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim. The president should be Christian, and the prime minister should be Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of the parliament should be Shia Muslim. So this is constitutional. And Hariri, his father, Rafiq Hariri, was prime minister 10 years before, and he was assassinated. And this time, too. So this very close relation between the Hariri family with Saudi Arabia. The family, both Rafiq Hariri and Saad Hariri, they are double citizens, have double citizenship from Saudi Arabia and the Lebanese. Actually, I would believe that this time Saad Hariri was called to Riyadh, not voluntarily he's visiting there, because the day before his interview with TV, he met the Iranian leader's special envoy, Mr. Belayati. So that made the Saudis very angry. So
thank you so much. Let me cross over to Mr. Mir Jabdanfar, a Middle East analyst who's standing by in Tel Aviv. Hi, what do you make of the resignation, quote-unquote, by Mr. Saad Hariri?
Well, I have to be absolutely honest with you. This has been one of the most mysterious cases and confusing cases regarding a head of state in this region, and you know and that's a lot to say, because in this region something spectacular happens almost every other week or every other month. But this has been a very, very mysterious case. At the beginning, it appeared that it was a genuine case, that he feels that his life is under threat, Prime Minister Hariri. But now there's increasing evidence coming to light that no, he was placed under house arrest under Saudi Arabia, or at least the Saudis were preventing him from leaving The country, a lot of questions were raised after his recent interview with Al Arabiya. The way he was behaving, Prime Minister Hariri looked very nervous. And you know, this is not the first time, if the Saudis are really doing this, and there's increasing evidence that they did put him on the house arrest, it's not the first time. The president of Yemen, Hadi, has also been prevented, who is in Saudi Arabia, has also been prevented from returning to Sana'a. He wanted to return recently to southern Yemen, where militia loyal to him are there, but the Saudis also prevented him because of an apparent disagreement between him and the Saudi allies, the United Arab Emirates. So there seems to be increasing evidence emerging that yes, he was at least prevented from leaving Saudi Arabia, that he was forced to do he was forced to stay within Saudi Arabia, and that yes, this is an ongoing pattern in Saudi Arabia of people who they believe are their allies. If they don't behave the way they want to, they'll place them under house arrest, or at least place a lot of pressure under them when they visit Saudi Arabia.
Mayor, given the very, given the nasty image, quote-unquote, of Hezbollah from the American perspective and the enormous support from Tehran for Hezbollah in Lebanon, what do you think of the prospects of implementing the nuclear denuclearization scheme coming out of the 6+1 of the United Nations? Iran is obviously coming under heavy pressure from Washington. The Trump administration doesn't trust Tehran, neither does Tehran trust Washington. So as a result, do you think this agreement on denuclearization will be dead?
Well, we have to stick with the facts here. You're absolutely correct. You're stating a fact that Iran and America have a very tense relationship, without a shadow of a doubt. But we also have to mention the other important fact that there is a nuclear deal between Iran and the P5+1, and that deal is working. Iran is abiding by the terms of the deal. This has been confirmed by the IAEA. Now, whether Prime Minister of Israel, where I'm talking from, likes it or not, or whether President Trump likes it or not, the Iranians are sticking to the deal. So the deal will continue to work as long as the sanctions which were imposed before the nuclear deal are not reimposed. Now, President Trump decertified the nuclear deal, but as long as the Congress does not reimpose those sanctions, the deal is going to work despite the disagreement of President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, the next question is, will the Congress reimpose it? I don't think the Congress is going to reimpose those sanctions, and I think that the nuclear deal will survive. In terms of a denuclearization of the Middle East, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Israel, according to the Washington Post, has nuclear weapons, but Israel has said as long as we don't have we don't have security agreements with our neighbors, we're not going to denuclearize. And as much as I'm against in principle of nuclear weapons, as long as countries such as Iran calls for the elimination of the state of Israel, that is really not going to happen.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for being with us. Welcome back. Ambassador Hua Liming, Israel is also watching developments in Lebanon closely, as we have heard from the account of Mayor. It was previously in control of a part of Lebanon during the civil war, and its troops have fought Hezbollah as recently as 2006, when 1,000 Lebanese were killed and 1 million people displaced in 1 month. So, question is, if Hezbollah gains a stronger foothold in Lebanon as a result of this instability, what is the possibility of a conflict breaking out between the two sides once again?
The gaining strength of the Hezbollah of Lebanon is, I think this is the basic problem of all this Hariri issue and all the Saudi and Iranian issue. Because after 6 years of war, Hezbollah has been the main force fighting against Bashar al-Assad. Fighting against the position of Bashar al-Assad. So after 6 years, Hezbollah has become a very strong force and gaining strength in the war ground. Now the Syrian war is going to finish. Two countries are very anxious about this issue. One is Saudi Arabia, the other is Israel. So Hezbollah has become a big issue in Lebanon. So this time, Saad Hariri has been called to the Riyadh. The problem is the Hezbollah, because he has been too peaceful to Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, he should have been taking some action, especially on the eve of his travel to Riyadh. Mr. Khamenei, the Iranian leader's special envoy, Velayati, visited Hariri. So the next day, he was called to Riyadh. So I think all these connections, the incidents have connections, are connected with each other.
What do you think of the prospect of having a civil war in Lebanon, and how do you look at the political ambition or even geopolitical ambition of this young Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia?
I think the destabilizing factor is the Crown Prince, because the Houthi rebels are outperforming Saudi preferences in Yemen. The attempt to blockade Qatar has sort of failed diplomatically, and then the defeat of ISIS is really jeopardizing Saudi's place in the region. And so I think this culminates in the pressure on the Hariri government in Lebanon, which has become subservient in many ways to Hezbollah. And I think Hezbollah is the strongest fighting force in the region. But I don't think there's enough opposition to lead to a civil war. I think Lebanon is secure. If Saudi or Israel destabilize the situation, of course, it could unravel. At first, we have to solve the Syria crisis, I think, before we can really have security in Lebanon.
Well, Saudi Arabia has been a very close economic and trade partner of China. We are a friend of Saudi Arabia. Having said this, what do you think of the agenda of this young Crown Prince?
I think he has his program, as he announced last year. He's going to have the 2030 vision for Saudi Arabia to industrialization of Saudi Arabia, and to change the political power, transition of power in Saudi Arabia, and to save Saudi Arabia from all the problems with Lebanon, with Iran, with Yemen. And really, I think that this the 32 years old young man, I wish he could deal all these problems smartly.
James, Lebanon has provided shelter for many years to Palestinian refugees, millions of them since the 1967 war. There have been a number of wars in the Middle East between Israelis and Arabs, and it's now hosting large numbers of Syrian refugees as well. Statistics show the number of Syrian refugees in Lebanon is equal to around 1/4 of the country's population. What does that mean for Lebanon?
Well, it's such a delicate balance, as was mentioned, to have these three distinct communities and other ethnic and religious communities, but to make this bargain, and then the three leaders, the president has welcomed back the prime minister, the Christian president has welcomed back the Sunni prime minister, Hezbollah as participating as more of a positive force, I would say. They've transformed from basically a terrorist organization to a political party. Now, there's a lot of violence in the region. There's the assassination of the former prime minister. But this is as close to stability as we've had in Lebanon. And to have this influx of population coming out of the Syrian crisis, shifting the demographics, and because, you know, the Palestinians have remained there for decades, these refugees may be there into perpetuity, may not be able to go back to Syria, and then we have to reconfigure this bargain. I think refugees would be terribly destabilizing for Lebanon.
Sorry for those who have been left homeless internally and externally, for those countries beset by sectarian violence as well as civil strife. Our best wishes for them. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.